Holmes's childhood. On May 16, 1861, H. Holmes was born as Herman Webster Mudgett in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, to Levy Horton Mudgett and Theodate Page Price. Gilmanton was a small, isolated town located 20 miles north of Concord. Some sources claim that Holmes was born in 1860, but Holmes himself stated that he was born in 1861, which was also verified in the New Hampshire Birth and Christenings Index. Holmes's parents were devout Methodists and demanded total obedience from him. Before marriage, his mother was a schoolteacher. She was described as a cold and distant individual who used religion as a daily guide for parenting. His alcoholic father followed a strict disciplinarian approach that resulted in physical abuse. Holmes's parents were both physically and mentally abusive towards him, and this was particularly true of his father. The harsh disciplinary tactics included prolonged isolation and even food deprivation. Furthermore, his father reportedly held kerosene-soaked rags over Holmes and the other children's mouths to quiet them when they cried. During these instances of abuse by his father, Holmes found refuge in the forest near his home. It was in the forest that he began dissecting animals and developing his deviant fascination with things, both dead and alive. It is possible that Holmes, who was known as a brilliant loner, was so traumatized by the abuse that it ultimately led to his inability to form meaningful relationships. His abuse may also have contributed to his penchant for lies, swindling, and abusing others. Serial killers are 6 times more likely to have experienced physical abuse in their childhood than the average population. However, Holmes's parents were not the only contributing factor to his abusive upbringing. As a child, Holmes was bullied and abused in school for his good grades and slightly odd demeanor. The most noted of these experiences occurred when Holmes, blindsided by classmates, was forced into a doctor's office where the hands of a skeleton were forcibly placed over his face. Holmes later recollected that this event was the reason for his curiosity about anatomy, leading him to pursue a degree at the University of Michigan Medical School in 1884. The existence of a ruthless killer like Holmes astounds the mind on a multitude of levels. While some see him, as his moniker exemplifies, an incarnation of evil, others regard his deviance as the product of former transgressions. Whether one's perception of Holmes is that of a man turned evil or evil born into a man, the determination of the cause for his lust for killing requires some insights into his childhood: animal torture, corpses, and first blood. Holmes's urges to experiment with animals failed to subside throughout his youth. He found woodland creatures near his childhood home and performed dissections on them to explore their biology. Initially dissecting reptiles, he later moved on to mammals, such as rabbits and dogs. This not only provided Holmes with flesh-cutting skills at a young age, but also acted as a psychological facilitator for his later obsession with human anatomy. Furthermore, advancements in medicine garnered much public attention to the point that skeletons were frequently displayed in doctors' office windows. For Holmes, accessing medical information was relatively easy. Holmes's morbid curiosity may have led to him killing his childhood friend at the age of 11, disguising it as an accident. Holmes, although a reclusive individual, had an older friend named Tom. While exploring an abandoned home together, Holmes recalls witnessing Tom die by falling off a landing. However, there is speculation that Holmes was standing close enough behind Tom that he may have intentionally pushed him. Early adulthood and education. In 1878, towards the end of his teenage years, Holmes married Clara Levering of Alton, New Hampshire. Clara was the daughter of a wealthy local farmer. Unfortunately for Clara, the marriage may have simply been a means of financial gain for Holmes. A year later, after graduating early from the first superior public school system, for example, high school, he left Clara and enrolled at the University of Michigan Medical School in Ann Arbor. Holmes used Anna's money to pay his tuition. The tactic of swindling women out of their fortunes later became a favorite tactic for Holmes. At one point, he had 3 wives in 3 cities. The women knew nothing about one another. Holmes was very charming, handsome, and persuasive in convincing women to take out life insurance policies, naming him as the beneficiary. With each mistress, he concocted elaborate stories to explain why they left him. In medical school, he began to personally procure cadavers to study, dissect, and use in his research. He also began robbing graves and morgues and sold the cadavers to medical schools, or utilized them to swindle insurance companies. Holmes conned insurance companies by creating pseudonyms for himself and then naming himself as the beneficiary of a life insurance policy he took out on a fictitious individual. To complete his ruse, he used a cadaver that he had disfigured to render it unrecognizable. Working in Holmes's favor was his attractiveness and mysteriousness. On the surface, he appeared genuine and caring, but beneath the facade was a manipulative and fraudulent businessman who used his intellect and charm to promote his calculated scams. During this time, Holmes ignored his wife and son, but it was not until he received nearly $12,500 on a single life insurance scam that he abandoned them completely. Holmes graduated from medical school in 1884 and received his MD. He went on to use his new title to create his lasting alias of Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, H. Holmes. Being a doctor was the perfect facade for Holmes, as it gave him the access, tools, and resources he needed to continue killing. The Castle, the 1893 Chicago World's Fair Exposition, highlighted some of the modern marvels of the time, including the Ferris wheel, dishwasher, and fluorescent light bulbs. The fairgrounds spanned 600 acres and had over 200 buildings, and it was reported that 26 million visitors attended in just 6 months. This environment was the playground for Holmes's new creation, the castle, which he created in detail and complete secrecy, a perfect setting to lure his victims. Holmes was aware that employees of the fair employed less than 2 weeks were not entitled to pay. Thus, he fired those he did not kill to avoid paying them. Another reason for his actions may have been Holmes's intent to keep the knowledge of the castle's layout a secret. The castle became an elaborate scheme to fulfill Holmes's dark desires, while also allowing him to make an income selling the skeletons of his victims to medical schools. Holmes, when constructing the castle, used complex architecture and a series of intuitive designs to suit his preference. Inside the castle, Holmes built an operating room, a torture chamber, a mortuary, and a room for conducting human experiments. The castle's guest rooms were built in a maze-like fashion, incorporating corridors leading nowhere, with concealed passages behind walls, sliding panels, secret staircases, peepholes into the rooms through the backs of pictures, and trapdoors concealing metal chutes that connected with the elaborately designed basement. Between Holmes's arrest and conviction for the Pittisell murders, the castle was mysteriously destroyed by fire. The fire may have been intentionally set by neighbors to keep the building from becoming a tourist attraction. Conclusion. The H.O.H. Holmes case exemplifies the connection between childhood trauma and violent crimes, such as multiple homicides. Physical and emotional abuse places incredible stress upon children, as does intolerance for persons perceived as less powerful. Holmes was a predator who viewed others to his end. His personality structure resembles that of a true psychopath, a remorseless and narcissistic person who controls others and lies repeatedly, all this while being glib and charming. Assuming that Holmes was a psychopath, the question arises, was he the product of abuse, or was the abuse a result of his intrinsic personality? The fact that Holmes's life as a serial killer was rooted in personality disorders and deeply ingrained abnormal behavioral traits strongly suggests that such persons continue to walk among us today. Thank you, friends, for listening today. If you would like to hear about anyone in particular, let me know in the comments. Comment your thoughts down below, and as always, smash the like button, subscribe, and share. Until next time, friends, from us at the Midnight Society.